Imam zadovoljstvo vas pozdravim u ime predsednika našeg pokreta, profesora Nestorovića, u ime predsedništva i svih članova pokreta. Naš današnji gost je profesor Gideon Gрајф, koga verovatno mnogi od vas poznaju po jednom izuzetnom radu koji je vezan za istraživanja o holokaustu, o genocidu, o samodaripenu i o svim formama masovnog ubijanja tokom Drugog svetskog rata. Njegov rad je posebno važan u kontekstu pokušaja revizije istorije koji se dešavaju u poslednjih 15 godina u Evropi i evo recimo direktnog povoda zašto to govorimo. Današnja prezentacija će biti vezana za jednu komparaciju koncentracionih logora Јасеновац i Aушвиц Birkenau. Prošle godine na proslavi oslobođenja Aушвиц Birkenau logora, koji je bio pod pokroviteljstvom poljske vlade, gde su učestvovali predstavnici Nemačke, nije pomenuto da je taj logor i poslednjih 7.500 logoraša oslobodila 322. streljačka divizija Crvene armije tokom Drugog svetskog rata. Dakle, oni koji su napravili taj logor bili su prisutni, a Poljaci koji su sve to organizovali nisu našli uopšte za shodno da pomenu šta je uradila Crvena armija u oslobođenju tog logora. Ovde kod nas na Balkanu revizija istorije je uveliko u toku. Mi smo upravo juče imali posetu jedne delegacije iz Evropske unije, to je delegacija Evropskog parlamenta u kojoj je bilo 9 ljudi. Vođa delegacije bio je Tonino Picula, Hrvat, i on je zvaničan izvestilac Evropskog parlamenta o Srbiji i bio je njegov zamjenik koji se zove Davor Štir, takođe Hrvat, koji je neformalni izvestilac parlamenta Evropske unije o pristupanju Srbije Evropskoj uniji. Oni su odbili da posete izložbu koja je posvećena Jasenovcu u Skupštini Srbije, a mala zanimljivost, taj Tonino Picula je objavljivao fotografije gde je on sa automatskim oružjem odmah posle one zločinačke genocidne akcije Oluje 1995. godine, kada je proterano gotovo 300.000 Srba iz Hrvatske, a preko 2.000 je ubijeno. A ovaj pomenuti Štir, koji je i državljanin Argentine i Hrvatske, je unuk Ivana Štira, koji je bio ustaški pukovnik i zamenik Maksa Luborića, upravnika logora Jasenovac. Dakle, Evropska unija se na jedan način, pored toga što pravi reviziju istorije, ruga Srbima, imenujući ove apsolutno antisrpske orijentisane pojedince. I nije loše da se opet prisetimo šta je to rekao maršal Žukov posle pobede u Drugom svetskom ratu, kada je referišući Staljinu izneo stav da smo oslobodili Evropu od fašizma, ali oni nam to nikada neće oprostiti. Dakle, revizija istorije u toku, na svim nivoima i, nažalost, mi u Srbiji smo imali situaciju pred Novu godinu da je naš poslanik, ovde prisutni doktor Antonijević, podneo deklaraciju u Skupštini Srbije da se usvoji ta deklaracija o genocidu nad Srbima u nezavisnoj državi Hrvatskoj. Međutim, 166 članova Srpskog parlamenta odbilo je da glasa za usvajanje te rezolucije. A juče smo imali izjavu predsednika države koji se navodno zgražava odbijanjem delegacije Evropskog parlamenta da obiđu izložbu o Jasenovcu, a isti taj je naredio 3 puta da Skupština Srbije ne glasa u usvajanju iste deklaracije. Dakle, proces revizije je mnogo dublji i mnogo opasniji nego što možemo na prvi pogled da primetimo. Ja ću sada reći par reči na engleskom iz poštovanja prema profesoru Gрајфу i današnja prezentacija će biti koncipirana tako da vi možete u svakom trenutku da se javite za reč i da postavite pitanja profesoru Grajfu koji insistira da današnje predavanje bude interaktivno. Dear colleagues, dear friends, allow me to thank you for coming to the lecture by Professor Gideon Gрајф, which will be held at the headquarters of the political movement We, the Power of the People. Dear Professor Gрајф, I would like to welcome you and thank you for your goodwill in delivering today's lecture, but also for your consistent fight for the truth about the genocide against Serbs, Jews and Roma during World War II. I am particularly pleased by the presence of all of you and the representatives of the Russian embassy. Also, thank you very much for coming here. I will say a few basic information about Professor Gрајф and his career.
But don't exaggerate.
Professor Gрајф is an Israeli historian, educator, and pedagogue. Dakle, izraelski profesor, predavač i pedagog. On je glavni istoričar i istraživač na Šem Olam institutu za edukaciju, dokumentaciju i istraživanja holokausta u Izraelu. Takođe je glavni istoričar i istraživač u fondaciji za holokaust u Majamiju na Floridi i viši istraživač i istoričar na ono akademiji u Izraelu. Profesor Gрајф se smatra jednim od najpoznatijih svetskih istraživača kada je u pitanju tematika koncentracionih logora i holokausta, odnosno genocida, i posebno koncentracionog logora Aушвиц-Birkenau. Njegov najpoznatiji, najčuveniji prilog koji je izazvao pravu malu revoluciju u svetu među istraživačima jeste njegova publikacija Plakali smo bez suza. To je priča o holokaustu i vezano je za istoriju takozvane Sonderkommando, to su, nažalost, Jevreji, zatvorenici koji su učestvovali u ubijanju svojih sunarodnika, naravno po nalogu nacista u koncentracionim logorima. Istraživanje koje je prvobitno publikovano u Velikom izraelskom centru za istraživanje holokausta, svi znate za Jad Vašem, postalo je međunarodni bestseller. Prevedeno je na 14 jezika, između ostalih i na kineski i na srpski. A knjiga Plakali smo bez suza inspirisala je...
There's a Serbian version also.
Serbian version, da. I said already that it is translated in Serbian. U Mađarskoj je snimljen film Son of Saul koji je dobio Oscara, a profesor je bio glavni konsultant po pitanju istorijske verodostojnosti teme filma. Zajedno sa Itamarom Levinom, profesor Gрајф je napisao knjigu Ustanak u Aušvicu, koja je praktično prva knjiga koja obrađuje pobunu onoga što je činila Sonderkommanda u pokušaju da se konačno oslobode nacista. On je takođe objavio knjigu Јасеновац, Aушвиц Balkana, koja je dobila prvu nagradu na Međunarodnom sajmu knjiga u Beogradu i to je deo trilogije koju je profesor Gрајф napisao i koja je posvećena zločinima Hrvata nad Srbima tokom Drugog svjetskog rata. Professor, the table is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I didn't understand 90% of what you have just said, but I guess it's true. And even if not, it's also okay. Thank you very much. I'm very honored, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I'm very honored to be here today. I'm very pleased. First, I would like to thank personally 3 people who encouraged me to come to you, Professor Ratka Ристиќ, and to my dear friends, Mr. Dragan Ilić and Dr. Nemanja Petrović. Are they here already? Not yet.
Dragan is here.
Where is he? Ah, good. Thank you so much. For me, visiting the Republic of Serbia, as you may know, is always a reason for happiness. And if you ask why, I will tell you. What made me become such a loyal friend of the Serbian people? It started 13 years ago. I had no contact with any Serbian aspect. My father is not Serbian, my mother is not Serbian, my grandparents have nothing to do with this country. I got a phone call from our Ministry of Foreign Affairs asking me to help the Serbian people to remember, to commemorate the large number of victims as a person who does it for 50 years or even more. So I said, why not? So I came the first time 13 years ago to the Republic of Serbia, and I have to admit, I fell in love this first second, and this love affair still contains. And nothing will change my mind. You know, I'm under heavy pressure, even terrorist pressure, and they don't know me, and there is no chance that I'm going to change my mind. Not for the next 100 years. So, I'm going now to talk about Јасеновац, make some comparisons with Auschwitz. Did you mention that they can ask questions?
Yes, of course, yes.
My Serbian is not so good.
It will be.
Yes. The Јасеnovաc camp was the lowest level to which mankind could fall, said one survivor. His name was George Miliša, and he was extremely right. The cruelty that prevailed in the Јасеnovаc camp makes it hell on earth. Another survivor, not of Јасеnovаc, but of Auschwitz, known as Kazetnik, his real name is Yechiel Feiner, said about another hell on earth, about Auschwitz camp complex, that it also is hell on earth, and called it another planet, where normal human values were turned upside down. We could say the same about the Јасеноваc camp, even if its reality in some central points differs from Auschwitz reality. In order to give you some insight in the historical and moral meaning of the Јасеnovаc camp, I will today conduct a detailed comparison between Auschwitz and Јасеnovаc. The ustаше regime was greatly influenced by German racial theory and fully adopted it. From the first day of the existence of the so-called NDH, Independent State of Croatia, the government, the Croatian government, implemented racial laws against the Jews, against Serbs and Roma, using the exact methods of discrimination which were already in place in Germany from January 30th, 1933. The racial laws had a strong effect on the daily life of Serbs, Jews and Roma, who lost their position in laws, lost their civil rights and their property. Finally, the laws enabled the authorities to deport thousands of innocent people into concentration camps. All these racial laws paved the way for the later policy of murder and annihilation. As a result of racial legislation and the policy of discrimination against elements which were defined as hostile to the Croat nation's spirit, Serbs and Jews and others were forced to wear identification marks which aimed to publicly humiliate them. For the Jews, for instance, it was the letter Ž for Židovi, or for the Serbs, P for Pravoslavci, and etc., etc. Auschwitz, we will soon see some pictures, is known as the biggest factory of death among the camps which Nazi Germany established in order to implement what is called the final solution of the Jewish question. There were 6: Auschwitz, Majdanek, Belzec, Treblinka, Sobibor, and Chelmno. However, at the beginning of its existence, Auschwitz was not an extermination camp. The original intention of the National Socialist authorities was to build it as a prison for the local Polish population, suspected to be hostile and dangerous to the German army, or found guilty of acts of resistance. The turning of Auschwitz into a factory of death was the result of previous experience based on the methods of the German mass killings implemented during the Barbarossa operation. As you may know, the operation started on June 22nd, 1941. In the framework of the Barbarossa operation, about 1,6 million Jews were murdered by the Einsatzgruppen, mostly by shooting, partially in gas vents. It was the first time that gas vents were used by the Germans. This system of mass murder was problematic for the perpetrators for several reasons. It was too slow, it was too expensive, and psychologically problematic for the murderers who had to look directly into the eyes of their victims. Not the victims had problems, the murderers had problems. During the few months of such mass killing in the Soviet Union, as conducted in Babi Yar, for instance, the German commanders responsible for the final solution decided to change the method completely, and instead of shooting, introduced permanent killing centers where no guns were to be used but poisonous gas. The new system solved all the problems that I've just mentioned. It was cheaper, it was quicker, and the killers didn't have to look into the eyes of their victims. The only contact with the murdered victims were the screams which emerged from the gas chambers and which could be heard around the area. The mass killing process in Auschwitz was completely impersonal, as we shall see later. In Јасеновац, the system was totally different. It was personal, it was direct, it was manual, a close, intimate, passionate murder by the ustаше. On the basis of the criminal and pathological distorted ideology of the National Socialists and the ustаше, the similarities between the two camps are easy to distinguish. The ustаше regime was to a very great extent influenced by Nazi Germany and its ideology, and wanted by all means to demonstrate this close relationship to National Socialism. The best example of this is the fact that the final solution of Jewish question in former Yugoslavia was introduced by the ustаше even before it was introduced by the Germans, 5 months before. When the ustаше started implementing anti-Jewish measures in April 1941, the final solution of Germany was not even decided by the German Nazi authorities. So the ustаше was first, not the Germans. The killing process in Auschwitz, as I mentioned, was more sterile and cleaner, with some distance between the murderers and the victims, whereas the killing process in Јасеновац was more direct, and the murderers enjoyed looking at their victims being murdered and tortured, and did not need any physical distance during the execution of their crimes. This point demonstrates that the ustаше killer acted according to more barbaric lines of behavior than the Germans, a fact which even German visitors to Јасеновац mention in their reports. In this sense, I would like to mention the report of General Gleise von Horstenau. He was the German military envoy to Zagreb, and it's worthy of note what he writes. For the German officers, the methods of ustаше killings were too wild and too barbaric. This is what a Nazi SS man writes to Berlin. Too wild and too barbaric in comparison to the system enacted in the factories of death like Auschwitz, Chełmno, Belzec, Treblinka, Majdanek, Sobibor, Mali, Trostinets, and others. Despite their demonic crimes, the Germans still wanted to be considered cultured. There is a famous speech by Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, in 1943 in Posen. He said, "We Germans will not dirt our hands. Our hands will remain clean." Very German. Photos which exist show us the amusement and fun of the ustаше murderers while performing their crimes. They didn't have psychological problems while doing their cruel deeds, nor did they feel any twinges of conscience. This difference allows us to state that the killing process in Јасеновац was much more barbaric, much more brutal, and even primitive. The sophistication needed by the Germans to protect their soul was not needed at all by ustаше killers. Both camps, Auschwitz and Јасеновац, although belonging to different geographical spaces, are synonyms and symbols of the extremely cruel regimes they represented. Auschwitz has become a synonym for the whole Holocaust, and Јасеновац has become synonym for the cruel ustаше criminal regime. Both places, Јасеноваc and Auschwitz, embody the non-human principles of the two regimes and their murderous attitude towards anyone they considered an enemy, an undesirable or inferior person, or those who did not enthusiastically support the regime. In order to implement the new killing system in Auschwitz, which I've just mentioned, from shooting to gas, a new mass murder process was developed based on use of poisonous gas, in this case, Zyklon B in German. At the beginning of 1942, two sites of mass murder were prepared in Birkenau, which is a sub-camp, the biggest sub-camp of Auschwitz, Nebenlager, to which the killing activity was transferred from the main camp called Stammlager. The murder was conducted in two buildings, the so-called Red House, or Bunker Number 1, and the so-called White House, or Bunker Number 2. The first transports of Jews who were deported to their death by the Reichssicherheitshauptamt, RSHA, reached the new killing facilities in Birkenau in February 1942. Due to the process of further modernization, the two bunkers were temporarily abandoned and 4 new modern buildings emerged in spring 1942, gas chambers and crematoria 2, 3, 4, and 5. The steady tendency of modernization, it's strange to talk about modernization when you talk about such a mass murder, but that's the tendency of the industrial mass killing, is strongly differing from the mass killing in Јасеноваc. Is totally different from the mass killing in Јасеноваc, where the process of killing can be defined as very primitive from the beginning until the very end in April 1945. That does not imply that the primitivity had any impact on the number of victims, but shows the primitive way of thinking of the Croat ustаше criminals, who were satisfied with their own bestial ways of killing and did not look for ways of to modernize, pleased as they were with the existing methods from the beginning till the end. The German method resembled a typical industrial process, namely, the purpose was to obtain the greatest results, in this case the murder of the highest number of innocent people, for the least cost. Nevertheless, the teams in these camps, the Nazi Germans and the ustаше Croats as well, had a very important common denominator. They were trained not to show the slightest sign of mercy, of sympathy or empathy towards their victims. On the contrary, they enjoyed their brutal and aggressive behavior and looked for new methods of torture, a way to prolong the prisoner's death, and competed who could inflict the most extreme torture, humiliation, and death. You certainly remember one night in Јасеноваc when there was such competition and the winner had cut the throats of 1,600 innocent prisoners. The ustаше, however, were very happy to dirty their hands, and the bloodier their hands, the happier they were. Inside the German killing facilities, the principle of remaining clean was introduced by using Jewish slaves in a variety of activities which allowed the German murderers to keep their hands really clean. Hundreds of Jews were recruited to the special squad, the so-called the Sonderkommando, which were forced to conduct the most humiliating work in the process of killing, although the killing itself was conducted exclusively, every time, by the German SS. The Jewish slaves had to carry the bodies of the murdered Jews to the crematoria, to remove their valuables, gold teeth, and cut the women's hair, to throw the bodies into the crematoria ovens, and finally, to throw the ashes into the surrounding rivers. In this way, the perpetrators had only to give the orders and not to execute the work with their own hands. So the Jews, the slaves, had to do the dirty work. The impersonal method of killing in Auschwitz was principally based on the famous speech held, I mentioned it, by the head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, in which he emphasized the following, I'm quoting, "We Germans will never get our hands dirty. We will remain clean." It's a speech which was recorded. You can hear it in YouTube. The necessity of remaining clean dictated the patterns of behavior of the German team of the camps. In Јасеновац, such an idea of cleanliness did not exist. Questions, remarks? You know why the lecturer needs questions? To drink something, but there is nothing to drink. No question. Yes, please.
Dear Professor,
Thank you.
I want to know, you mentioned in your book that only Croats of ustаше had a concentration camps for Serb children.
Right. The Germans did not have such a place. There was separation, of course, in all camps between men and women. This is an old German tradition. Except two cases, there were two Familienlager, family camps for Jews from Theresienstadt, Czech Jews, and the family camp for Sinti and Roma, the only exception, where the whole family lived together until they went to the guest chambers, but not a special camp for children. Even the barbaric Germans did not have such a camp, only the ustаше. You're right.
And I will add something to that Professor Ристиќа said, but something different. Serbs liberated Croats from fascism, and they will not never forgive us.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions, remarks? Good. Please.
I'd like to ask about the revision of the history. It's maybe not too good for bellies, but let's discuss the numbers of victims. What's the problem with revision today? We have revision of the numbers of victims in Јасеноваc. They say it's about 70,000, something like that. And we learned in the school there was about 1 million victims there. And not only that, but also there was commission during Yugoslavia, during Tito era. I wrote somewhere, I actually learned that he personally ordered to establish a commission which should count victims, and the result was about 700,000 people. And when they finished their job, it was not allowed to be published. So maybe I'm sure you learned who was Srbijo. He was the head of that commission, and he had to get away from Yugoslavia because he was not allowed to say loud and clear the number of victims. So, what's your opinion?
Well, I really don't like to elaborate again and again about the numbers. You know why? Because for me, more important is the personal, individual suffering of each one. Let it be 1,000 or 5,000 or 1 million. I was forced to refer to the numbers, and I really don't like it Of course, the number of 75,000 is absolutely fake. Fake. And the numbers I mentioned in my book are authentic. But principally, I think we should speak about the suffering of the victims and leave the number to number 2 or 3 in priority. This is less important than to speak about the big amount of suffering. That's my personal opinion.
Can you compare atrocities?
By the way, there is a similar tendency among those who try to reduce the number of the victims of Holocaust, which is about 6 million. We hear crazy numbers, and we know the number. We know. So it's very similar. So please forgive me, I don't want to elaborate on it.
Okay, can I ask one more question?
Yes, please.
What about atrocities? Can we compare them? Where was the worst place regarding what happened to those?
Again, if I continue the previous answer, for the victims of this crime, I think Јасеновац, they suffered more because there was more time for suffering, because the ustаше wanted them to suffer long time. You know, in Aушвиц, you went into the gas chamber, it took about 6 to 10 minutes until they died. Suffocation is a horrible death, horrible. It's like you jump to the river and you don't know to swim. It's horrible. But in Јасеноваc, it took even more time. So the suffering which interests me is much heavier in Јасеноваc.
In addition, about his question, the consequences of the process of revision are very strong. Now we have in Croatia historian who claim that Јasenovac was a kind of training and education center for Serbs, for different arts and handcraft. And in Croatian National Assembly a few months ago, they had a conference. The leader on the conference was Representative Igor Vukić. He claimed that Serbs committed genocide on Croats. So, American sources, Israeli sources, Serbian sources, FBI sources are talking about the number of at least 700,000 victims in Jasenovac. But not only Jasenovac is in question, we have hundreds of places where Croats committed mass killing of Serbs. Stari Brod, close to Višegrad, Bihać, Prebilovci, Glina, Gradiška, Pag, hundreds of places. And maybe more than 1 million Serbs were killed during the Second World War on the territory of independent country of Croatia. So the process of revision is very dangerous. Unfortunately, we have even ministers in Serbian government who are talking about 80,000 killed Serbs in Jasenovac. Even some representatives of Serbian Orthodox Church claim the same thing. So revision is very dangerous and it has to be stopped as soon as possible.
Sorry. Thank you. For those who became prisoners in both camps, Auschwitz and Jasenovac, the biggest challenge was to survive under the inhuman conditions which prevailed in the camps. In Auschwitz, it was especially important to maintain the desire to live. The desire was essential for the continuation of the will to live. Jasenovac survivors report the same psychological principle. As long as they did not lose their desire and the passion to live, they had a certain chance of survival. In Jasenovac, however, the life of the prisoners was more chaotic. There was not the same amount of constant and clear rules prisoners could adapt to in order to improve the chance of survival. I once made a comparison between survivors of Auschwitz and Majdanek, another German Nazi camp, and most of the survivors told me, you know, Auschwitz was an orderly place. You knew at 12 you get something to eat. At 6 o'clock you get back to your barrack. Whereas in Majdanek there were no rules, no timetable, nothing. Chaos. The killing methods in the Јасеновац developed over time and became more extreme and more brutal, based on the same principles of non-humanity and non-mercy in the attempt to cause the prisoners the utmost suffering, what I've just mentioned. Another difference between the camps refers to the policy of secrecy. The Germans tried to hide the reality from their victims by distributing lies and fake information of what awaits their victims, disguising the killing sites as showers or public baths. The murderers of Јасеновац were more direct and thought they had nothing to hide, committing their crimes under open skies. A very clear point of similarity is the greed of both the Germans and the ustаше. The victims, murdered or imprisoned, had to hand over all their property, which they brought to the camp, and the perpetrators were now the new owners of the property. Of course, priority had gold, silver, jewelry, etc., etc., bracelets, earrings. Possessions like apartments, bank accounts, jewelry, valuables were already confiscated before arrival in the camp. The Germans were no doubt the greatest murderers in history, but also the greatest thieves in history. The ustаше acted under similar lines and started the confiscation of property of Jews and Serbs already by April 1941. The ustаше authorities, under the leadership of Ante Pavelić, tried to imitate Germany and became even more extreme. I can summarize it in the next sentence. The pupil wanted to become more extreme than his teacher. Another point of similarity is the fact that the camps were a state inside a state. No ministry, no court, no politician, no lawyer could intervene in the reality of the regulations of the camps, not in Auschwitz nor in Јасеновац. The SS and the ustаше saw the camps as their own kingdom and felt they could do anything without being criticized, inspected, or punished. They felt they could continue with their barbaric crimes forever. Indeed, Auschwitz and Јасеnovаc were among the longest lasting concentration and extermination camps, remaining in operation almost until the end of World War II, until January 1945 and until April 1945, respectively. Another point of similarity is that in both camps there was a total loss of sanctity of life. The life of the victims had no value at all, whereas death was worshipped, and in both places death was developed into an art and into an ideology. It seems that the members of the SS and the ustаше competed among themselves who would become more cruel, more barbaric, and more sadistic. The policy of a non-human attitude prevailed in both places, robbing the prisoners of the minimal human dignity, minimal of living conditions, minimal sanitary conditions, trying to ruin their inner spirit and their psyche, exploiting their bodily strength, and finally killing them in various methods, by poisonous gas, by burning alive, by cutting bodies into pieces, by starvation, beating. I found not less than 57 methods of killing the ustаше invented, as if one is not enough. In both camps, the inversion of values existed. In Auschwitz, as well as in Јасеноваc, a different scale of values was adopted, which stand opposite to the normal values of the world before World War II. In other words, the 10 commandments were reversed. For instance, thou shalt not kill was reversed to thou shalt kill. There is a famous sentence written by a Jewish poet. His name is Paul Celan. He was born in the city where my father was living, Czernowitz, now Ukraine, then Romania. Paul Celan wrote in one of his famous poets, "Death is a master from Germany. Der Tod ist ein Meister aus Deutschland." The same can be said about the ustаше. Death is a master from Croatia. Questions, remarks?
If I may, you notice that we are very interested in numbers, and I want to ask you something. We know that there were fewer Jewish people in the former Yugoslavia than Serbs, of course, but do you have a data? What's the percentage of Jewish people killed in
80%. Only 20 survived, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, in Yugoslavia, the whole existence of the Jewish people was under threat during the Holocaust. But in Yugoslavia, it's one of the few places in which the Jews, wherever they turn, is somebody who wants to kill them. On this side, the ustаше, and if they run to the other side, the Germans wait for them. Yeah. So they were blocked between two groups of murderers, one more sadistic than the other. About 80%, unfortunately. So, you know, I'm from time to time when I'm here in the weekends, I go to the Jewish community, and you see such a small group. It's really heartbreaking. And it was a wonderful community. Very patriotic, very patriotic.
Would you like to present some?
Yes, of course. You read my mind.
Mr. Gideon, if I may, and please, I must make one correction.
Please.
You said 5 minutes before that ustаше has 59.
57.
57, yeah? But it's not true. 3 days before, I made handwriting documents put in electronic form. Just for killing kids, I have 12 pages.
Really?
Each pages,
Wow.
27 rows.
Oh.
And I have 12 pages. It's more than 300. And after everything what we found, ustаше invented 2,000 methods of torture and killing people in all this.
Be so kind and send me, please.
Yes,
I will give you
I
my
have my phone.
If you're right, I will update my lectures.
You can't believe.
I can believe it.
I must stop. I think far from 7 times because I can't type anymore. You can't believe.
I do believe. I do believe you.
But it's 12 pages.
They were
writing. What did they like? Just for kids.
They were capable of everything.
Yeah.
We have no discussion.
And I don't know what's happened. We have the similar things, but that was German talk about Aушвиц. That was the camp with a shower cabin and everything else. It was before 83 years ago. And we have a similar situation now, where Croats now said, this was the camp for keeping children. This was the kindergarten. They tried to keep our children.
Summer camp.
Yes, you can't believe. And it's impossible for all of us that things happened. And I think this is only one reason because that happened. We all try to forget. Serb people is famous to forget. But I think the time is coming. We must admit everything. They must admit everything. I think they must pay for everything. And after that, never something like that will be happen in a era, in a future. And the history shouldn't be forgiven.
I agree, I'm with you.
Thank you.
Let us see some photo. Let me show something and then I will not go away until I answer all the questions. Okay?
Okay.
So we see on the screen Do you see something on the screen?
Yes.
Sorry, we have another question.
Yes, I just asked them to first to show some visuals, and then I will answer everything. So you see here an aerial photo. Yes, it's the aerial photo. Made by American airplanes in 1944, which is the period in which every day, 10 to 20,000 Jews. It's a fact. 10 to 20,000 Jews per 24 hours were murdered in this place in Birkenau, which is a huge place. 10,000 minimum to 12 to 20,000 Jews every day, 7 days a week, including weekends, holidays, whatever you want. Here is another aerial photo of Birkenau, which is huge place you visited. And we see here on this wall 2 of the 4 crematoria buildings which I've just mentioned. Here is the underground undressing hall. There are twins, these 2 big ones. There are 2 big ones and 2 small ones. We see the underground gas chamber. You see the 4 openings through which the gas was poured inside. And you see the big building in which the bodies were cremated. The Germans didn't want to bury, just to burn, because if you burn something, it's gone. You have no evidence. You know, it's very interesting psychologically. On one hand, the big passion to murder as many Jews as possible, but on the other hand, the basic tendency of each criminal not to leave traces, and it does not contradict. Here again, aerial photo of Birkenau. You see on the left side, the roofs are the barracks of those who temporarily were not directed to their immediate death, had to be as slaves for German industry. This is the famous gate of Birkenau. Birkenau is a sub-camp. Aушвиц, the main camp, has 44 sub-camps, Nebenlager in German. This is how it looks today. Typical barrack. And as I told you, the Germans were the biggest murderers in history, but also the biggest thieves. They took everything. What are they going to do with all these classes? Nothing. Just to take. This is one of the small crematoria and gas chambers, number 4 and 5. The difference is that they don't have a cellar, an underground level, where the gassing was. Everything is done par terre. One of the few survivors, David Oller, who was a painter, reconstructed immediately after the war, between 1945 and 1947, what he saw as a Sonderkommando member. He died in Paris 15 years ago. This is the big building I've already showed you. This is a model showing gas chamber and crematorium number 2 and 3. And this is the horrible, sadistic commander of the 4 crematoria, SS Otto Moll. They say he was the most cruel person ever born on this planet. And look, this is very typical for the Germans. The man you see here singing German folk songs with accordion, one of them is Mengele standing there behind. They have just finished to murder 10 or 20,000 Jews. They got a special weekend, and now they are happy after this murder action, and they can sing and then enjoy life. This is Otto Moll. One of his, I think somebody asked me about babies, about children. Sometimes there were special transports with children alone, babies, or with the mother. And Otto Moll, one of his horrible hobbies was to throw the still living Jewish babies into the pit he himself initiated in front of the eyes of the mothers, and then he shot the mothers and threw them also into that pit. So it's a cruel place, Auschwitz. This is the undressing hall. Humiliation is a very important ingredient to humiliate the victims, to paralyze them before being murdered. The women came first, but the men joined them, so they were together, men and women, primarily to humiliate them. The only place in which the painter Oller was not present, otherwise he wouldn't survive, is inside the gas chamber. And this is how he saw in his imagination the last seconds, praying, crying, screaming, but nobody came to help them. This is the primitive way in which the bodies were taken out from the gas chambers by the Jewish slaves. and to be cremated soon. These are the so-called cynically dentists pulling out the gold teeth, cutting the women's hair, and this is the burning of the bodies in the crematoria ovens in Birkenau. This is again mall with the Jewish babies. And we have also, like in Јасеновац, at the end, actions of resistance. For instance, the Sonderkommando prisoners try to warn the Hungarian Jews which are not yet on the way to Auschwitz, be careful, it's not a Hilton hotel, it's not a summer camp, it's a place of death. How do you warn people? You send them photos. So clandestinely, they made a series of photos showing the Sonderkommando, the Jewish prisoners, throwing bodies of naked Jewish women into the same pit we have seen before. You see them here. The Jewish slaves throw the bodies into the pit in order to warn the Hungarian Jews, don't come. If you just can escape, hide, do anything, not to reach Auschwitz. It's a dangerous place. Here are the women still alive 2 minutes before being murdered, already naked because there was no place inside the building. So many Jews arrived at that day, so they had to undress outside. Let us move now to, yes, we have an uprising in Auschwitz on October 7th, 1944. We don't have enough time, so let me now go to Јасеновац, which you know. Here is NDH and Mr. Pavelic. Look, Hitler stands a little higher to show who is more important.
Who is the Trump, huh?
Who is the Trump, yes. And here the order for Serbs and Jews to move out certain places, the order of deportation. I collected some typical documents. Ustаше order for Jew and a certain Jew somewhere here, Hirschenhauser, to be deported to Јасеноваc. Another document of deportation. And we see here the way to the camp, Dinko Sakic and Luboric, the map of Јasenovac, one of the few photos we have. And the very cruel arrival of prisoners who have to, I'm sorry I have to show you such horrible photos. This is the famous Serb cut used by the murderers.
Srbosek.
And this is a Jewish man who by arrival he had to give his wedding ring, but you know, it's a little difficult after so many years. According to what I read, they used the simple way, they just cut his finger to gain it. And they were so proud to be photographed. Here a victim before his head is cut off. 1 second before he's being brutally murdered again. And bodies and bodies and bodies and bodies. This is Јасеноваc. Horrible. I'm sorry I have to show you all of this. In the Sava River, after 45, you know.
We had even in Belgrade, by the Sava Stream, thousands of bodies.
Yes. That was a little visual presentation. Do I have still time to go on?
Yeah.
Questions. Yes. Please.
First of all, thank you for very nice presentation. I was now thinking in a way of this systematic difference between Јасеноваc and Auschwitz. So this industrial and individual crime. That's, I would also mention that, well, in Auschwitz as well in Јasenovac, people are killed in several camps, but in case in the former NDH, you know what that means. The Serbs were killed also in other places, all around the state,
Yes.
which is not counted. And so in small villages, the whole villages disappeared. Well, now you mentioned at the very beginning a very important thing. You mentioned that Auschwitz was established as a tool for the final solution. what it means. We are talking about the beginning of 40th last century. But
no, the final solution came to the world only late 41.
Yeah,
we do not know the exact date because we have no documentation.
I see. But we had, in the mid of 90s, the Croats did it. So, in 1995, we had, also, some say a war or whatever. And this is, something which is not so, how to say, at least in the western part of the world, not so discussed in a way of what happened to the people who were killed or whatever, changed the place, were forced to leave their homes. So now finally we come to the question of the revision of the history. You are a very excellent scientist and you published a lot of data. But well, if I am a historian, I'm not, but if I publish the other paper, we can discuss scientific, arguments. But this is not the revision of history. This is made by the politicians. And when we talk about the numbers, we are not talking about your and my opinion. We are talking about the how to say, the attitudes of the government. In former Yugoslavia, it was forbidden to talk about Auschwitz. When the country disappeared in a civil war, now it's again forbidden because we are surrounded from the countries who more or less were not the enemies for the Nazis. The question, my question, personal question, what the Israeli government attitude? The whole world, we know about the Auschwitz, we know about the holocaust. But the Serbian question, the question of the Serbian killing of Serbians is something, how I would say, hidden even by the scientists. Intentionally or not, is it forced or not by some higher force? But I have an opinion that I'm not the only one. That this is not, well, I don't know. I would like to see your opinion. What do you think about it?
Well, I'm not representing here the Israeli government. I represent myself. I don't think there is a vicious intention on behalf of Israelis to hide it. It's true. The knowledge about the crimes of ustаше and the whole problems of the region are not very well known, but take into consideration that we have thousands of existential problems in Israel and we cannot deal with everything. And if I ask somebody in the street, do you know what Јасеновац is? Even now, I doubt if many people would know about this. This is a problem, but I don't think somebody gave an instruction. I don't think so. No, I don't think so. And about the policy of the government, I can't tell you. I'm a private person. I'm not a minister of the cabinet, but I don't think there is an evil intention, or nobody gave an instruction not to talk about Јасеновац. I don't think so.
Just to maybe you get me wrong. I was talking in the former Yugoslavia, we,
He was not accusing Israeli government. He's asking why the truth about ustаше crimes are hidden on the global level.
Because
I think this is important question for our government, not for their government. Our government give their own data, and now we have situation 1 month before in our National Assembly they don't accept it.
Exactly.
What about it? I think the Israelis don't have nothing about this. Our government is wrong. Our government is a traitor government, and we must talk about this. And I think it's not time about it.
Most of the people
you know how many we have so many problems of security, and it's too much.
In addition, on the beginning of the Second World War, in so-called independent country of Croatia lived about 26% of total population Orthodox Serbs. Now in Croatia we have less than 3%.
Yes.
During 20th century, from the beginning until the end, especially 1995, we had a constant tendency to remove Serbs, to kill Serbs, and to transform Orthodox Christians to Catholic Christians. General tendency was Serbs have to disappear. Unfortunately, the revision of history is still very strong process. And at the end of the Second World War, Ustaši tried to destroy concentration camp Јасеновац and the surrounding facilities. They did it, but not at all. But after that, 1 year after, Josip Broz Tito, the leader of Yugoslavia and Communist Party,
He completed everything.
ordered the removal of Јасеноваc. And if you visit Јasenovac now, it's like a camp where some bad people killed some innocent people without any ethnic or religious determination. That's the problem. And I agree with my friend Bora. We in Serbia are guilty because we accepted the state of the art, and nobody was talking about Ustaši and Jasenovac.
Now is the time.
Yes, thank you. Okay, you can.
It's never too late.
Yes. One more question before I go on. Yes.
I have visited both Jasenovac and Auschwitz. And in Auschwitz I heard a story from Polish guy. The first way of killing was shooting. Second, and then Nazis saw that it is too expensive.
Not in Auschwitz, it was in the Soviet Union, not in Auschwitz.
I heard the story, so I want you to confirm it.
I'm a historian, I tell you it,
And
no.
the second was hanging, and it was lasting too long.
Hanging was from time to time, but not a...
And the third and more efficient way was...
No. Sorry to correct you. Sorry to correct you, but that's not true. I mentioned it in my lecture. The change of way of killing starts in the Soviet Union, according to the experience of the Einsatzgruppen, has nothing to do with Auschwitz. And Auschwitz was, until the end of 41, a concentration camp because there was no final solution before this date.
Right?
I'm sorry, I have just one more question. I would like just to ask you if you made any research regarding the role of Roman Catholic Church in independent state of Croatia.
Well,
not systematically, but let's say locally. Did they have any role in these atrocities?
well, I published a book about Alois Stepinac, so you read it and you have the answer. Of course, of course.
Okay, but I would like if you may share something with these people, because we learned a lot about those fratres who made atrocities, some of them by their own hands.
That's true. That's true. And like Nazi Germany, the church gave support to the Nazi party. It's the same case. In Germany, I don't remember that there were priests or people of the church which murdered with their own hands. In Croatia, yes, there were some, absolutely, some of the worst murderers. But the support of the church was given in both cases. In both cases, yes. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Nebojša Đorović, and I'm very honored to be here. Okay, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Dear Professor, my question is, since we are witnessing that we are neglecting the historical facts in last decades, how can we fight against that. From the historical point and from the social point, as we are living with that will not happen again.
They say education, I don't think that this is enough. Education is one aspect. I think by repeating and repeating and repeating and not withdrawing from the facts, by all means of media, of press, of politicians should repeat the truth until the world will listen. The problem is that the voice was too low or not heard at all. You have to scream the truth. If you don't scream, nobody will hear you.
I witnessed that also the Jewish community is also like closing one eye.
In Croatia.
Yeah, in Croatia.
Not here, in Croatia.
Yes.
Well,
Why is that happening?
what choice do they have? They are a small community, they are afraid. I can understand it. It's not nice, but I think they have no choice.
Well, I hope that at least you recognize that here in Belgrade, we, the power of the people of Serbia, are one of the most important communities and parties that will fight and stay firm in that battle.
I get very nice emotional emails from time to time from Serbian people whom I don't know. And I have to admit that even in the street, I'm sometimes, in Israel, nobody stops me in the street, but in Belgrade, it happened more than 5-6 times that people stopped me and thanked me. And I tell it only to tell you that I feel that I am doing the right thing, although I got 21 warnings of people who want to kill me. I hope they will not be successful, but I'm under threat of life.
I have to say,
where are the bodyguards?
I have to say what happened today in Serbia, too short.
Please.
Danas sam čekao profesora pored platoa, ispred rektorata i uključio sam sva 4 na sred ulice i prilaze mi policajac i hoće da me kazni. Naravno, tu ne smeš da uđeš, ne smeš da prođeš pored Narodnog pozorišta. I on kaže, znate šta ste uradili? Rekao, znam, čekam profesora Gideona Grajfa, vodim ga na predavanje. A policajac me pita, pa gde je Gideon Grajf? Pa rekao, evo, sad će da dođe. Pa kaže, ja znam ko je taj čovjek. Ali ne smeš da stojiš ovde, neću da te kaznim. I u tom trenutku nailazi profesor i policajac mu otvara vrata. Dakle, policajac zna ko je on i nije nam naplatio kaznu. Okay, go on.
I think that he invented this story.
The policeman got 100 euros, right?
Maybe. Ladies and gentlemen, in comparison to Auschwitz, some of the camps attached to Јасеновац were dedicated, we mentioned it, to only female or child prisoners. Auschwitz subcamps did not have such places, and women and men stayed together, although always separated. Both camps tried to exploit the physical power or energy of the prisoners for their own benefit by establishing factories, real factories or workshops, as the possibility of replacing the laborers with new slaves was so easy. However, the similar policy of not supplying enough food or adequate working conditions caused the quick death of slave workers in both places, and the industry or semi-industry in both camps was not productive due to the inhuman treatment of the prisoners. On one hand, they expect the prisoner to work 20 hours a day without food, with punishment. Impossible. Both camps deprived the prisoners of most natural needs of human beings. Among other aspects, it is important to emphasize the lack of proper medical treatment. Prisoners who became sick or exhausted could not get help and died in pain, getting no medication or almost no medications. In Auschwitz, the so-called hospital had nothing in common with the normal clinics or hospitals known to us, providing no real treatment or real medications. A similar situation existed in Јасеновац. Sick prisoners, knowing that the so-called hospital would not cure or heal them, preferred not to complain and continued their slave work, hoping to be cured naturally. In both places, it was clear to the prisoners that to complain about their health would just bring them closer to their death. In both places, the medical staff was involved in the criminal activities. Comparing Auschwitz and Јасеновац, the first might be considered to belong to the 20th century, Auschwitz, while Јасеновац reminds us more of the Inquisition of the 16th century, which used primitive methods of torture and killing. Unfortunately, those primitive methods were not less effective than the German ones. The modern character of Auschwitz and the primitive character of Јасеновац can also be seen in the case of the administration. Auschwitz had a very modern administrative system. It had several departments, secretaries, most of them Jewish because they were more educated, translators, adjutants, and a technical team, etc. All this was linked to the German government, directed to Berlin. There was, of course, a big gap in the normal correspondence between offices, but we should not forget that this correspondence tried to hide the huge crime. On the other hand, Јасеновац did not have any of this. It had no offices, no regular correspondence, nor intelligent Jewish secretaries. It had a primitive reality with no necessity of official administration. In comparison to Auschwitz, Јасеnovаc did not produce any secret diaries or reports like we have in Auschwitz. The most important Auschwitz documents are called the Auschwitz Scrolls, which describe the miserable lives of Jews and others belonging to the special squad, the Sonderkommando. In both places, prisoners never gave up their hope to be liberated and made attempts to escape. In Auschwitz, relatively speaking, it was easier, and hundreds, yes, hundreds of prisoners, Jews and non-Jews, tried to escape. Most of them didn't succeed, like in the case of Јасеноваc, where they tried even though it was more complicated and risky, and only towards the end did the prisoners have some success in breaking out of the camp. The constant attempts of escape show us that the spirit of the prisoners was not destroyed. Another significant difference is that in Auschwitz there was an underground movement, quite well organized, whereas in Јасеноваc there were no conditions for a creation of such an underground movement. The similarity between the two camp systems is primarily the result of the fact that National Socialism was similar to Ustashism. Both are extreme, destructive ideologies which planned and executed murderous plans which brought about the annihilation of millions of innocent people. By understanding that Ustashism is no different to Nazism, we might better understand the criminal acts of the NDH government. Extremely significant is the fact that the Ustasha introduced the final solution, we mentioned it, even before the Germans did it. The persecution of Jews, the deportation to the Jasenovac camp, and confiscation of the property, and all the anti-Jewish steps were introduced earlier than in Germany, where the final solution started only in late 1941. Jasenovac became the slaughterhouse of the Yugoslav Jews, even though at that time Auschwitz was still a concentration camp. The conclusion arises that the Ustasha were quicker than the Germans in their final solution, or alternatively, that the crimes of the Ustasha were the final solution before the final solution. The speed of the policy of persecution by the Croatian government was much faster than the speed of the German government. The Croatian pupil, as I said, was quicker than the German teacher. Auschwitz and Јасеновац symbolized the extreme policy of dehumanization of the body as well as the spirit, and the means of reaching those goals were mainly terror and humiliation. The sanctity of human beings did not exist. The only human beings were the murderers themselves, who got the best possible conditions, the best food, and enjoyed the property of their victims. The dehumanization was conducted towards all prisoners in both camps, mainly to Serbs, Jews, and Roma, and all others who were considered dangerous or undesirable or inferior. In certain cases, when prisoners were ready to collaborate, they got better conditions, but with no guarantee that this would continue forever. Both camps had only two kinds of people: the group which had everything and the group which has nothing. In both camps, the attitude of unnecessary suffering was used in order to amuse those causing the suffering. Murdering or killing a prisoner without causing suffering was not enough for the perpetrators. Unless the prisoner was tortured and humiliated, his death was not enough. Unnecessary torture is a term that developed by American sociologist Daniel Goldhagen in his book Hitler's Willing Executioners, 1996. For these purposes, a variety of methods were introduced to prolong the process of death, causing the victim horrible suffering on the one hand and amusement for the murderers on the other hand. In Auschwitz and Јасеновац, all repressed, brutal and evil emotions could be expressed without any fear of the consequences. Within the framework of terror, the camp authorities in both places, Auschwitz and Јасеnovац, tried to implement an extreme policy of punishment for real and imaginary crimes. For any form of disobedience, the prisoners were punished severely, and very often the punishment was death. A point of similarity of both camps is that after the war, there were attempts to diminishing the number of victims and to characterize the camps as slave labor camps and not as death camps. We mentioned this. This tendency in the context of Auschwitz is called Holocaust denial, but we might use the same term concerning Јасеновац. There is a denial of Јасеnovаc and the Ustasha crimes by young generations, and both unfortunately continue to this today. Morally, this phenomenon can be seen as a second murder of the victims. The denial murders the victims for the second time, while ignoring their existence, desecrates their human dignity and is a murder of their memory. Humiliation was extremely important for the Nazis. Humiliation was extremely important for the Ustasha. Humiliations were used against the Jews, but also against non-Jews. The most favorite form of humiliation was public humiliation with the participation of the audience. Concerning Jews, the policy of humiliation did not stop when the German policies changed in 1941. From expulsion to the final solution, the Jews had to be humiliated even minutes before they were gassed in the chambers, when men and women had to undress before being gassed. Even before, during the mass killing of the Einsatz group in which I've mentioned, Jews had to undress completely before being shot to death. In Јасеноваc, the same policy of humiliation was introduced for the amusement of the killers. I'm coming to the conclusion of my lecture. The various examples which were mentioned in this historical introduction lead us to the conclusion that among criminal regimes there is the worst, but sometimes even worse than the worst. Nazi Germany brought criminality against humanity which the world hadn't seen to that point. Analyzing all the above-mentioned manifestations of evil, it is not difficult to come to the conclusion that the Ustasha regime and its atrocities were even worse than German Nazi atrocities. The Ustasha's wicked minds overshadowed in many aspects the murderous minds of the Nazis. The technique of murders of the Ustasha were much more brutal, much wilder, and more malicious. The Croats even surpassed the Germans in their wickedness and in their bloodlust. It seems that they lost all humanity. It is therefore justified to define Јасеновац as the Auschwitz of the Balkans. We have emphasized the common denominators, the differences and the identical aspects, and although it is not always possible to compare the two regimes, in this case, it is legitimate and even recommended in order to send a warning to the world. Auschwitz and Јасеноваc should never be repeated again. Thank you.
Professor, thank you very much for this extraordinary presentation, and I hope to see you again in Belgrade and in this building. Thank you very much.